Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. And that's so important. We've been talking about that over the past couple of weeks as we've been looking at this parable of the sower. And that's the point to Jesus' parable. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. He's speaking to this crowd of people, and there are a lot of ones in the crowd who are going to hear what he has to say but are not really hearing. They're not really listening. They don't plan on responding, so they just don't understand. They don't get it. They don't have the ears to hear. And then there are some that are following him, his disciples, that they're going to get it. They're going to understand because they're listening intently, and they want to do something about it. They want to respond. They want to obey to what Jesus is saying to them. So we are discovering that some people are just more receptive than others to the word that's being sown. It's the same even today. And we are learning that response is determined by the condition of the soil. Response is determined by the condition of the soil, the condition of the heart. And so we looked at soil condition number 1, and that's the hard heart. The compact heart, people who are just not going to get it. They're just not going to understand. They refuse. We looked at soil condition number 2. That's the shallow heart. That's people who will respond to the word, but it's just a superficial, shallow response. Maybe it's intellectual. Maybe it's emotional. Maybe it's self-centered. It doesn't go any further. It doesn't make its way to the heart, and it's proves to be genuine, especially when trials and difficulties and temptations of life hit. This type of heart proves that it's not genuine. It's not a genuine faith. And you can go back and you can get caught up and you can look at those, listen to those sermons, those messages online. But today we're going to dive into soil condition number 3. And Jesse read it for us. Thanks, Jesse. But I just want to look at verse 7 again, as it describes this type of soil. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plants. So this is the weedy soil, the thorny soil. You know, I don't know about you, but I hate pulling weeds. Anybody like pulling weeds? I don't know. Maybe some of you enjoy it. I hate pulling weeds. You know, it's usually hot out. The sun's just shining and, you know, I'm all sweaty and sticky, and then I start to feel itchy. You get that itchy feeling because you're pulling weeds. I don't know what it is, but I just don't enjoy pulling weeds. But we all know that if you don't take care of it, if you don't take care of the weeds, the plants won't grow. The plants share the same soil as the weeds, right? And so the weeds are going to steal the nutrients from the plants, the nutrients that the plant needs to grow. There's not room in the soil for both the plants and the weeds to grow together. We've got this garden box in our backyard, just a small garden box, and I love getting the tomatoes and the cucumbers and the peppers and jalapeno peppers and all that. No thanks to me. I don't do a lot of work with it. It's all Christy. She's the one that plants and weeds everything and waters everything usually. But I love getting all that. But there's work to be done. And if you miss a couple days, or especially we go on vacation, we come back a week later and the plants have just overtaken the garden box. It's just out of control. And so Jesus actually tells the disciples what these thorns are. In verse 14, he says, the seed that fell among the thorns stands for those who hear, but as they go on their way, as they go on with life, they are choked by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. And that's really important. They do not mature. But he says these weeds, these thorns are life's worries, riches, and pleasures. These things will choke the life out of you. Life's worries, riches, and pleasures. Relentless weeds. The thorn of worries. You know, we are so full of anxiety nowadays, and there's just so much to worry about, isn't there? Just a lot going on in our world. And, you know, even our kids nowadays and the younger folks, kids, teenagers, young adults, full of worry and anxiety nowadays, more than it seems when I was a kid. It seems like when I was a kid, and it's hard to remember back then, but I feel like I was just carefree. I was just riding my bike around the neighborhood, playing cops and robbers, and I didn't have a care in the world. Nowadays, it seems like there's just a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety. Life's worries can be so overwhelming. The thorn of riches, this is another relentless weed. And you say, well, this isn't really a weed. It's not a thorn. If I could just have a little bit more, it would be great. There's nothing weedy and thorny about having more money, right? Well, there seems to be this connection between our riches and worries and anxieties. It seems like the more you have to worry about sometimes, the more you have to lose. And I think we know deep down inside that money, that riches and our stuff will never satisfy us. And it's the same with the thorn of pleasures. You know, there's nothing wrong with the good things in life. There's nothing wrong with experiencing pleasures in life, but we will not find fulfillment in these things. And I think we know that deep down inside. It's why someone like Tom Brady, after he wins his third Super Bowl, says, man, there's got to be something more than this. There's just no joy in this. And I wonder how he's feeling after his seventh Super Bowl. You think he's experiencing joy at this point? I don't know. But these weeds, life's worries, riches, and pleasures, they're strong weeds, relentless. They're nasty weeds. They'll take over. We have this section in our backyard where this pine tree is growing, and it's a little island with some mulch, and we try to plant things in there, and everything we plant just dies. There's just these really nasty weeds there. We've tried everything. We've tried to pull them several times. We've tried all kinds of sprays. I've taken the gasoline back there and poured gasoline. I've even tried to light them on fire. It just doesn't work. They're really nasty weeds. And it's kind of the same with these worries, riches, and pleasures. They're just very nasty, relentless weeds. And so in this soil condition that we're talking about today, the word sinks in. The word is planted. The word sinks in. It even kind of begins to grow. Maybe even it begins to establish some roots. But it says in Luke's communication of this parable that it never matures. It never reaches maturity. And then Matthew, when he tells this parable, when he records the parable, he gives us another little detail. He says it will never bear fruit. It won't bear fruit. It won't mature. It won't mature. It won't bear fruit. Why is that? It's because this is a crowded heart. You may even call it a divided heart or a preoccupied heart. And just as the plant can't share the same soil with the weeds, God will not share the soil of your heart with anything or anyone. There's not enough room in the soil of your heart for both. It's crowded. These weeds that choke the life out, that keep the plant from maturing, that keep you from maturing and producing fruit. Actually, these things are more than weeds. These are actually idols. Let me explain that a little bit. You see, we, in our Bible reading plan, and many of you are a part of it, I think we have some 20-some people that are a part of the Bible reading plan. And let me just say that if you've kind of fallen along the wayside through the book of Leviticus and Numbers, or, well, we're not, we've gotten through Leviticus and we're in Numbers right now. And if you've kind of fallen along the wayside, because those are difficult books to read, jump back in. You don't have to get caught up, just jump back in. But the one thing that we're discovering as we're in the beginning of the Old Testament, I think, is, we think, and I know that many of you have made similar comments, that have the same thoughts. How could the Israelites fail over and over? How could they worship idols over and over? And we look at the Israelites when God had delivered them from Egypt, and they're at Mount Sinai, and they worship this golden calf. And we think, how in the world could they worship a golden calf, something that Aaron made? And then even after they get to the promised land, God has done so much for them. He's provided incredible things and provided their own land for them. And they just continually worship idols over and over and over again. And we think, how could they do such a thing? Yet we have our own idols, don't we? Our idols aren't made of wood and stone. Our idols are different idols. We bow down to different idols. Our idols are life's worries, riches, and pleasures. And Jesus talks about worries in his most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 6, we read about it. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, and what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." You see, when people worry, their minds and their hearts are preoccupied. They're failing to trust that God has it under control, that he knows what's best. They're failing to seek first his kingdom. Worry leads people away from their Creator. And life is full of things to worry about, right? I mean, just think about it. Think of all the things that you have to worry about. You know, we have goals to accomplish, business to take care of, problems to solve. There are financial issues, relationship issues, and we could just continue on and on and on. But this weed, it causes us to seek our security and our hope and our peace from lesser gods that lead us to just more and more and more worry. And this is closely related to riches, and Jesus talks about that as well in his Sermon on the Mount. "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Whatever you treasure, whatever you value, your affection will go towards that. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. And this is so important. You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot serve both God and anything. And we'll come back to that here in a little bit. Jesus talks a lot about money. And why does he talk about money? Well, he knows that our money and our stuff is God's greatest competitor for our hearts. And some of you may know the story of the rich young ruler that came to Jesus and said, "What must I do to get eternal life? What's the most important thing?" And what did Jesus tell him to do? Go sell everything that you have, everything that you own, and give it to the poor. And the scripture says that this man went away sad because he owned a lot. He had a lot of stuff, and he couldn't do it. You see, money had a grip on his heart. Money was his idol. His heart was crowded. And we know that money and stuff in and of itself are not evil. But there's such a potential. There's such a potential there. And oftentimes money and stuff keeps people from giving their full allegiance worshiping God alone. And I think that's one of the reasons why God tells us to give. God tells us to be generous with our money and be generous with our stuff. It's the best way to keep money from getting a grip on us and taking root in our heart. And the pleasures of this world, God has created human beings, and this is just incredible. He's created us with the ability to experience pleasure, to experience joy, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with these things. God created it this way. So think about all the ways that we can experience pleasure in life. But these things are supposed to draw us to our Creator, draw us to worship Him. And a lot of times these pleasures will draw us away from our Creator and actually draw us to worship the pleasure itself instead of the God who created it. And Paul talks about this in Romans, and he's talking about sexual perversion in Romans chapter 1. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator who is forever praised. Taking what God intended for good and distorting it, worshiping it. Pleasures can very easily become an idol of worship. So, when it comes to the word being sown, the message of God's kingdom, the gospel, why are some more receptive than others? Why do some have the ears to hear? Well, once again, response is determined by the condition of the soil, the condition of the heart. Some just have a hard heart. Some have a shallow heart, not genuine. And these are quite obviously not followers of Jesus. The word being sown is not reaching the soil of their heart. But what about this weedy, thorny soil? I mean, think about it for a second. I mean, this is kind of hard to discern. You read some commentators and they say, well, these aren't true believers either. And others say they are believers, they're just not maturing. I mean, on one hand, it seems that these are people who believe the message. They accept the word that's planted and it begins to grow. It just doesn't reach maturity. It doesn't provide a fruitful harvest. On the other hand, we see that Jesus said things like this: no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from a thorn bushes or grapes from briars. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. So, is this a true believer or not? I don't know. And we really can't judge the heart. We can see the fruit, though. So for those who have this crowded heart, these are those who accept the word. They may go to church on a regular basis, maybe every single week. These are people who read the scriptures, maybe. Maybe they attend Bible study. Maybe they're part of a community group, but they're still trying to hang on to the things of the world. They still have idols. There's two competing kingdoms within them, divided allegiance. They have a crowded heart. There's no room in the garden box. There's no room in the soil of the heart. And so these weeds, life's worries, riches and pleasures, they'll steal the nutrients every time. They'll choke out the growth, and you will never mature. You'll never mature. You'll remain fruitless. You'll never produce a crop. It's like our garden box with a bunch of tomato plants, but no tomatoes. It's like a cornfield with no corn in it. And what good is that? So Jesus' words, once again, you cannot serve both God and money. You could actually put anything in the blank right here. You cannot serve both God and what? So many things you could fill in the blank here. You can't serve both God and wealth. You can't serve both God and relationships, a substance, a job, entertainment, a hobby, sports, politics, power, comfort, life's worries, life's riches, life's pleasures. You know, and some of the things that we put in the blank may even be good things, but it distracts us from the ultimate thing. So think about it. What could you put in the blank here? What might you put in the blank here? What might be keeping you from maturing, bearing fruit? So let's conclude once again by asking this question: what is the condition of my heart? Take an audit of your heart this morning. Is it crowded? See, we were made to worship. We were made to worship. God created us that way. And so our hearts will be drawn to something. Our hearts will always be full of something. The fact is that we actually long for our Creator. We long for our Creator, but oftentimes we settle for lesser gods, don't we? About 3 years ago, we took a trip out west, and I've talked about this trip before. My family took a trip out west. We took 2 weeks, and we headed out. We saw a lot of the national parks, the Grand Canyon and Bryce Canyon and Zion National Park and all those incredible. How many of you have been to some of those parks? Just incredible, you know, and you're standing there and you're looking and you're like, how can you believe that there isn't a God when you look around and you see this incredible stuff that God made? And so you try to take pictures of it. You know, you're like, I want to go back and I want to show people what we experienced, and you take pictures, and then you look at your pictures and you're like, it just doesn't even do it justice, right? You're like, this doesn't look anything like what I experienced. And you know, when you're standing in the Grand Canyon or you're standing at Zion National Park, and you're not going to bury your head in the brochure, are you? You're not going to be like, hey, look at this picture. Isn't this so cool? No. You're not going to do that. And I mean, how much more the God of the universe compared to all the lesser gods? We should be blown away by his splendor and his majesty and the grandeur of the real thing, not these fake gods. But sometimes we bury our heads in the brochure, and sometimes we are content with just looking at pictures. These are just idols. You know, and I think there's a sense that we're always going to be fighting this. We're always going to be fighting to crowd out the idols of this world. So what do we do? What do we do about that? Well, you know, it's not our job to take care of the weeds. You know, it's our job to surrender. It's our job to lean in the direction of our Creator, to continually lead in His direction, to seek first His kingdom. Fill ourselves fully with Him and His Word. And when we do that, there's not going to be any room for anything else. And He's the gardener. He's the one that sowed the seed to begin with, and He's the one who will take care of the weeds. Lean in His direction. Be filled with Him. So, if you find yourself this morning thinking, I've got this type of a heart, I've got a crowded heart, a divided heart, a preoccupied heart, I just would say this: stop settling for lesser gods. Because God, the God of the universe, is saying, look up here. I mean, look at me, look to me, lean in my direction, listen to me, obey me. There's no need to worry about any of those lesser gods. I'm all you need. He's saying, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear.